Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, we're at the Motor City Madmouth, and I am pleased to be joined by former Florida Panthers assistant general manager Mike Santos. And Michael's been a hockey analyst for us for a long time. And Mike, how appropriate is it that we're talking about the Panthers exclusively tonight? So welcome back to the Sports Exchange, Mike. Glad to have you with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and it's great to be here when the Panthers are doing so well.
Yeah, they really are. The Panthers, quite a year. They really are. You talk about this team, the way that they've managed to overcome things during a COVID year. I think one stat that stands out about the Panthers this year, Mike, is that Florida's reached a 50-point mark in their 36th game of the season, the second fewest required to reach 50 points in franchise history. They had 34 games played in 95-96. What's your take on the year that they're having?
Well, I think it's a great year, with lots of obstacles to overcome. I mean, like every team. I mean, this has been uncharted territory for everyone dealing with COVID.
Right.
Um, and even though they finished the season and had a playoff last year in the bubble in Toronto and Edmonton, this was really a different situation because you're playing games, you're traveling, you're playing a lot of games against the same opponents, which is always difficult, and you're playing at least up until this point in time in front of really no fans. I know there are teams now that are starting to bring in minimal amount of fans, but it's all been different, even different from what teams like the Panthers experienced in the bubble last year.
All right, why don't we go back to your days with the Florida Panthers? I want you to give everybody an overview about what you did and how long you were here and the types of coaches that you worked with back in the day. I know you were here on two stints, I believe 2002 and 3, and then for another 4 years, 2010, 2014. So you're very
Yeah,
familiar with this organization for sure, Mike.
yeah. I was there for a short period of time, a little more than a year, back in 2002, 2003. Um, Different time, obviously. There had just been an ownership change the previous year, uh, from Wayne Huizenga to Alan Cohen and partners, and the National Car Rental Center, as it was known at the time, was brand new. It's hard to believe that how quickly these arenas age, but it was an exciting time. It was an exciting time. Lots of changeover. In a short period of time, I was involved. I was director of hockey operations and corporate counsel, but in a short period of time, I also worked with a number of general managers. Chuck Fletcher, who was an interim GM for a bit, did a great job. Rick Dudley, and eventually Mike Keenan. And Mike Keenan was the coach for most of the tenure while I was there. Had some terrific players back in the day, including Roberto Luongo, who I was with the Islanders when we drafted him, and then I was with the Panthers when we acquired him twice. The first time back down in 2002 2003 season, and then again the second time when I was actually the key person in engineering the deal to get him from Vancouver and bring him back to Florida. So yeah, it was great then, and then I had the opportunity to join the organization again in 2010. There had been actually a playoff drought that had lasted from the time I left before until I was with the club again in 2010, 2011. We spent the year primarily cleaning house, so to speak. We lowered our payroll and created lots of room under the salary cap at the time. And we were in a situation where we had to spend $28 million in free agency in 2011 just to get to the salary cap floor. We did that. We signed 14 free agents. Most importantly, we stocked the cupboard with draft picks, which became a number of the top players that the Panthers have playing for them today. And in 2012, we made the playoffs again and actually won the first division championship in the club's history, only to lose in double overtime at home to the New Jersey Devils, who went on to the finals. So we got a lot of great memories of my time with the Panthers. Both stints worked with some great people, some great coaches, a number of coaches. Learned a lot, particularly from those coaches and from a lot of the scouts that I worked with. Some who were there both times that I went through the organization.
Well, you said a mouthful with Roberto Luongo. His number one is retired in the rafters of the BB&T Center. I have to admit, being from the Detroit area, the number one is synonymously known with Terry Sawchuk. We all know how good Terry was, but you know, talk about Roberto Luongo. I gained a lot of respect for him early in the century. You know, I was living out in Phoenix at the time and moved to Florida, but I used to watch the Red Wings and the Panthers, you know, on satellite TV out then. And Roberto Luongo, you want to talk about an incredible goaltender. My goodness, they don't get any better than him. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer all day long. And to me, he's synonymous with South Florida, Mike.
Yeah, well, I first laid eyes on Roberto Luongo when he was a 16-year-old playing for Val d'Or in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And that particular year, with our first round pick with the New York Islanders, we drafted a guy who I also had a history with, not only in New York, but when I was in Nashville, and that's J.P. Dumont.
Okay.
Great career. They were teammates on a great team in Val d'Or, and ended up the year after we drafted JP in the first round, we made Roberto Luongo a first round pick. In fact, we picked Roberto and Eric Brewer, who played in the Western Hockey League, with back-to-back picks early in the first round that year. Then the following year, I spent a lot of time traveling to Val d'Or, and anybody who's never been to Val d'Or, it's way up there. There were a couple of occasions when I went to bed after a game in the little inn that was in town, and woke up the next morning, opened my curtains, and I couldn't see out the window because the snow had risen above it. So I spent a lot of cold, snowy days and nights in Val d'Or, but it was all worth it. It was a great team to watch back then. And the year after we drafted Roberto, he actually went to successive Memorial Cup Memorial Cup tournaments as the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League champion. First year with Val d'Or, and then the second year, as happens a lot in junior hockey, as it gets closer to the deadline, teams sort of gear up for a Memorial Cup run, and he was traded to Lacadie Bathurst and brought that team to the Memorial Cup. So Roberto brought his Quebec Major Junior Hockey League teams to back-to-back Memorial Cup championship tournaments, which is quite a feat for any player, never mind a goaltender from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. From there, actually negotiated and signed his first contract with his then agent, Gilles Lupien, the former Montreal Canadien. And he spent time in our American Hockey League with our American Hockey League team, which was in Lowell, Massachusetts at the time, the Lowell Lock Monsters, and had a lot of success there. He spent pretty much most of his rookie year there. First start in the NHL was actually in Boston, and wouldn't you know, he recorded a shutout, and the rest is history. Mike Milbury decided at the entry draft in Calgary that he was enamored with a young guy coming out of the U.S. National Development Program named Rick DiPietro. So he traded Roberto to Florida, and I was in Florida with open arms while I was there for Roberto that time. And of course, I had left for Nashville when Roberto was then traded again during the draft. The year the draft was in Vancouver. I believe it was 2006 that he was traded to Vancouver, and of course had a great run in Vancouver, brought the team to the Stanley Cup Finals, only to lose to the Boston Bruins in 2011, and also had an Olympic gold medal added to his resume during that period of time while he was in Vancouver. The infamous overtime game against the USA team and gold medal in Vancouver. He was on that team, and fortunate enough that he was available when I was still with the Panthers in 2014, and acquired him from Vancouver at the trade deadline that March. So yeah, a lot of great memories with Roberto, and gee, I don't know too many people to tell you that have anything but great memories with him, because in addition to being a world-class goaltender, he's a world-class person. His family is world-class, and I think that he would tell you himself that after his first year in Florida, he knew that was home for him, and met his wife, who was the daughter of the folks that owned Pizza Time right near the practice facility, and he's now a fixture in South Florida, and I think that's the rightful place for him.
Let's stay on the goaltender theme, Mike. The Panthers went ahead and signed Sergey Bobroski, who's now 32 years of age, on July 1st of 2019 to a 7-year, $70 million contract. He struggled his first year. I'm going over some of his numbers: 23 wins, 16 losses, and 9 losses in overtime in 50 games. Had a 3.23 earned run average with a .900 save percentage. They were, obviously those numbers were a little bit low. But when you talk about the person that Bobrovsky is, obviously on March 13th of 2020, actually pledged $100,000 for part-time workers during the COVID-19 situation. Do you feel that Sergey Bobrovsky probably pressed a little bit during his first campaign, knowing that he had to live up to that contract?
He may have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know Bob personally. I've certainly been in organizations and that have played against him. He's a terrific goaltender. There's no doubt about that. Um, I don't know enough about him personally, but I would think that a situation like that would uh, give a goaltender some comfort, knowing that he's going to be there for a while, knowing that they've
Right.
invested the type of contract in him, that he's going to be the guy. Um, but there was probably some adjustments. I mean, there's definitely an adjustment playing in a place like South Florida, and it's not necessarily the things that you would think, but they're all things that become an advantage, uh, but they are things that take time getting used to. One is the fact that you've got nice weather all the time, um, you know, and there are things that are distractions, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's things you can do in South Florida in the fall, winter, and early spring that you can't do in other places around the National Hockey League. That's number one. The second thing is, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Florida's got as tough of travel as anybody in the National Hockey League. I mean, if you look at the map, I mean, you've got Edmonton way up there in the northwest corner, and then you've got Florida way down there in the southeast corner. And so, nobody travels in the National Hockey League as much as those two teams. So that's an adjustment, and particularly with a goaltender, because when you're the number one guy, you're going to be the guy in probably 70 to 75% of the games anyway, which means you're going to play a lot of road games. You're going to play a lot of games without with a lot of travel involved, not so much a lot of rest, and many times some back to backs in tough places on the road. So I think it's just things that take a little time to get used to, especially in his past. I mean, he played in places like Philadelphia and Columbus, where
Right.
the travel is significantly less. and a lot easier than it is in Florida. And the climate's different. Everything's a little different. So I would chalk it up more to that. And by the way, I didn't think he had a bad year his first year.
Right, right.
It just pales in comparison to how well he's playing this year. And I think you're seeing the real Bobrovsky now, and the guy that they gave that big contract to. I think he's a fantastic goalie, and they've got really good coaching around him.
Right.
Well, I think the sky's the limit with what he can do there. You see what a guy like Vasilevsky's done in Tampa.
Right.
Not only winning the cup last year, but he's been, you know, for me, head and shoulders above the rest in the NHL so far this season. And that's where things have changed a little bit, particularly in the last 10 years, anyways, maybe even less, where European or even Russian goaltenders, since Dominic Hasek, let's say, have become, they've become more leaders when it comes to their teams in the NHL. Where for the longest time, there weren't a lot of non-Canadian or U.S. goaltenders that the teams would trust to be the guy that could bring them to the top.
Well, I mean, you said it about Sergey. He's having a fine year. I mean, as of last night when he beat the Red Wings, his record stands at 14-5-2 with a 2.82 goals against average. So there's no question year number two is certainly much better than year number one. So that bears itself out. So let's talk about the Panthers. Been an interesting week for them. They lose Aaron Ekblad for 12 weeks, suffered a leg injury on Sunday against the Dallas Stars. He obviously was leading defenseman with 11 goals, and he had 35, and 11 assists over 35 games. How much of a tough loss is it for the Panthers when you deal with a player the magnitude of Aaron Ekblad?
Well, I believe what they're going to miss most about Aaron Ekblad is his leadership. I mean, this is a captain type player. I mean, he's a leader
Right.
on the team, and I don't use that term lightly. I think this is a guy that was asked to become a leader young, in his career, and has lived up to it. From what I've seen. I mean, he was actually the first round pick my last year with the Panthers. So I was never with the organization while he was playing for the club. But that's what I think they'll miss the most with him. Now, that being said, I think the Panthers have a good group of veterans on that team,
Right.
including some that they've acquired recently. But Huberdeau, Barkov, those type of guys. I mean, they've been around long enough now. They're not kids any longer. I mean, and they're part of that leadership group. Acquiring a guy like Patrick Hornquist, who's won Stanley Cups and who's been around, and leads by example in the way he plays. And he plays a real gritty, hard game. Goes to the tough places on the ice. I mean, those are the things that I think will help the Panthers, and certainly they'll miss Ekblad, but I think they can get over missing Ekblad just because they've got what's, I think, most important with winning organizations, and they've got a group of leaders. They have a leadership team as opposed to looking to one guy or one or two key guys on your team that when they go down you can't recover. The Panthers have several leaders in this group, so I think they'll be just fine.
All right, so let's talk about the main reason that the Panthers are among the elite teams this year. This team here, you talk about Jonathan Huberdeau. I mean, he scored 17 seconds in the last night's game, but he's certainly a very big part of this team. We've already alluded to Sergey Bobroski, and they picked up Carter Verhaeghe, who's had a nice year. He's got 17 goals, 15 of them even strength. I believe he was playing was he playing for Tampa last year, I believe?
Yep.
So it didn't take him very long to go. All he had to do was take the track up I-75 or to come down to Florida. And there's a lot of guys on this team. I'm just talking about some of the ones that stand out. But why would you say, Mike, that the Florida Panthers are among the elite teams here in the National Hockey League? I mean, the record stands at 23-9-4, and they're playing good hockey with victories in each of their past 3 games. But why do you feel that they are as good as they are?
I think there's a couple reasons, Scott, and the first is I don't think this is anything new. I mean, I saw this starting to happen a little bit last year, but they had some other obstacles to overcome. But I believe, I think they believe in themselves. I think that's the most important thing. I think they go out there night after night expecting and knowing they can win. And then the way this season has been created with, all this interdivisional play, they've done a really good job of beating the teams they should beat. They've done a bang up job. I don't know their record. I don't have them in front of them, but they've done a bang up job of taking care of Detroit. They've done a
Well,
bang
they're
up.
5-2 against Detroit right now through 7, so they'll have
Yeah,
one more.
they've done a great job against Dallas. They've done a really good job against Nashville, who's coming on. I mean, they've won the games they should win, and they've also been right there in those games against Tampa and Carolina. So, I mean, are those 3 teams at the top of that division, or who have been at the top of that division all year at the top of the league? Maybe. I think we'll find that out when we get to the playoffs. You know, they're definitely going to be in the hunt. There's no doubt about that. But this year is so unique that we really don't have a measuring stick because you're only playing a quarter of the league.
Right.
Um,
That's true.
but that'll make the playoffs real interesting, right? I mean, we all have years where we have somebody's number or they have our number. Um, the Panthers certainly have that over a few of the teams in their division this year. Um, it'll be interesting to see when we get to the playoffs, and hopefully they play enough that they get out of their division and get to match up against some of these teams, not only on the East Coast, but some of the teams out west too, because there's a team in Colorado I have a real interest in. I think that's going to be an interesting team to watch this year. They've started to build something the last couple of years. You've got teams like St. Louis that they haven't taken a year off yet since their Stanley Cup win almost 2 years ago now. And then the Canadian division's been really interesting to me. I mean, is Toronto a team that's been a division rival of the Panthers for a long time before this year? Are they for real? I don't know. It's tough to tell. It's tough to tell the way everybody's playing within their division, and we're gonna find out.
I've always found that this year is fascinating, Mike, because it reminds me of the original 6 era when everybody played each other 9 million times. But COVID circumstances being what they are, it's interesting to see an opponent 7, 8 times for sure.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, Scott, because if you go back in time, let's say the original 6 days, and you look at the standings year after year after year, the same teams were at the top and the same teams are at the bottom year after year after year, and a lot of that comes with the belief, right? And I think the Panthers are one of the teams in their division anyway right now that believe on a nightly basis, along with Tampa and Carolina, that they're going to go out and they can win every night. Um, and uh, and that's not necessarily true for the teams at the bottom of that division right now. They don't have that belief. Part of that comes from some of the guys that they've acquired that have been in those big games, that have won Stanley Cups. Even I would call them role players like Cherry or Vetrano. I mean, Vetrano's got I think 9 or 10 goals this year, but he's got a lot of big goals. I can tell you that. So when you have guys like that, and those are key guys because your leaders, have not necessarily been in those type of games yet, right? I mean, Huberdeau hasn't been in that type of game yet. Barkov hasn't been. They've played in some playoff games, but they haven't played in those kind of games. They haven't played in the Stanley Cup Finals. Even your goaltender Bobroski. I mean, he swept the Lightning 2 years ago. In goal, but he hasn't been in in that Stanley Cup final or even that conference final yet. But guys like Vetrano, for instance, or Patrick Hornquist, just to name a couple, they've been there. They've been in Game Sevens in the Stanley Cup Finals. So
Right.
that goes a long way. So it's not just having depth on your team, but it's having a depth of leadership that I really like about this Panthers team. And they've done a nice job. They meaning their management team. Billy Zito and Paul Krapelka. I mean, they've done a nice job of coming in here and not ripping things apart, because there really wasn't a lot of things broken with this team.
Hmm.
They just needed to give them, a few things here and there, and give them the opportunity to develop the leadership and develop that belief that they can win every night. And that's what they've done really well.
Well, I can tell you right now that as the Panthers continue to play more meaningful games, and you are right, they've gotten a lot of contributions from other players outside of the superstars that they had. A different player steps up every night. All of a sudden, national television, they take notice later on in the year. The NHL's revised their schedule. The Panthers should see NBC 2 or 3 times at the end of the year. Of course, you know what's going to happen come playoff time as well. So, do you feel that the Florida Panthers, Mike, are finally gaining the national respect that they deserve?
Um, yeah, I think it's still going to take a little more time, Scott. You know, I mean, that comes with success. I mean, a national following and national respect comes with success. Like, and they're having success this year,
Right.
but they've got to continue to do it, and they've got to get to those big games, right? I mean, they've got to get into the second, third, or even the Stanley Cup Finals in the playoffs. They got to advance. Making the playoffs isn't enough.
Right.
And once you get a couple of playoff series wins under your belt, once you start advancing and getting to the second round, the third round, really challenging in the playoffs for the Stanley Cup, people take notice. I mean, they have no choice but to put you on national television at that point in time, and that's what they look to. I mean, ESPN is going to have this deal now. I mean, that's what they're going to be looking for. They're going to say who are the successful teams, especially ESPN is going to be looking who are the successful U.S. teams
Right.
this year in the playoffs, and that's what they're going to build their schedule around the following year.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Monday Night Football. If you have continued success, you're going to be on Monday Night Football all the time. If you don't, you're on there for 1 year, then they take you off. But I think the Florida Panthers right now are obviously the longer they continue to play the way they are, people will take notice of them. So they'll have plenty of opportunities to try to avoid the Rodney Dangerfield thing, and that's maybe to get some respect. And again, what we've seen so far this year, I realize we have a sample size here, and we have a lot of good hockey up ahead over the next 6 to 8 weeks, especially as we close in on Memorial Day. We're going to find out very quickly, what everybody around wants to know: are the Florida Panthers for real, Mike?
Well, the the best thing that can happen to the Florida Panthers, in my opinion, and to hockey in Florida, particularly South Florida, would be a playoff matchup with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay.
These organizations have been around for a quarter century now, and
Mhm.
they've never met in the playoffs.
Mhm.
And that's where rivalries are built. I mean, it's nice that they share a state. It's nice that now finally they're in the same division, and the way that the playoffs are constructed in a normal year, not just this year, there's a chance they can meet in the playoffs. Um, that's what's really going to spark a rivalry, a real rivalry. That's what's really going to spark interest, not only in the state of Florida and in South Florida, but that's what's really going to spark national interest is when you create rivalries. I mean, it's those are the things that get created, year after year. When you start meeting the same team in the playoffs. I mean, back in the '80s, for instance, I remember the old Adams division. When you had Montreal, Boston, Quebec, Buffalo, even Hartford, when the first two rounds were those teams, same teams battling each other year after year, guess what? When the Bruins and the Sabres, go 7 games in 1986, well, guess what? The next year in September and October, November, and December, people want to go watch the Bruins and Sabres play because of what happened in that playoff series, and national TV wants to put them on because of what happened in that playoff series. So that's one thing I would love to see happen, and I think it would be a great thing for hockey. I think it would be a great thing for ESPN going forward next year. And it would be a fantastic thing for all of Florida, and especially South Florida, if those two teams, which are good teams now, could match up in a nice long playoff series.
Well, I guess two rivalries that stand out in my neck of the woods, Detroit against Chicago was always a blast to watch. And we can't forget about the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. Boy, were those nasty too. But
what about Edmonton and Calgary?
yeah, they get ugly up there, don't they?
Alberta. I mean, like those are, back in the day, Montreal and the Quebec Nordiques. Like those are the things that develop. But it's unbelievable that in 25 years that these two teams have never met in a playoff series, and that's got to change, and that'll be the one thing that I think will send hockey fans on their ear about the Panthers and the Lightning.
Well, believe it or not, a matchup that I would be intrigued to see this year would be the Florida Panthers taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Oh, they've had some interesting matchups this year, for sure. And they've gone at it. So, and the irony, believe it or not, with the Lightning and the Panthers is for at least the 2021 season, they share the same American Hockey League affiliate with the Syracuse, I believe, Crunch, right? Because the Charlotte Checkers are not playing this year. So, they have a little bit of nastiness with their minor leagues where, it was great for the Sunshine State that they went ahead and were willing to work together under adverse circumstances, because I think it's good for the state in general that the Panthers and the Lightning are sharing the same minor league affiliate this year. But when let's just say you have an interesting dynamic, okay, and put your personnel cap on. When you have two teams sharing the same franchise with the rivalry, how does all that shake out from a coaching standpoint, personnel standpoint, about who gets more ice time and so forth?
Well, this is such a unique year that I don't think there's going to be too many issues with that. But I can tell you, back in the 80s in particular, but even going into the 90s, there were shared affiliates in the American Hockey League, and it was a big issue. It was a big issue, and typically the team that controlled the coaching staff and the head coach was the team that got the upper hand on making sure that their players got a little bit better development, players got a little more ice time. And I mean, there were a lot of battles over those types of things, and I was involved in some of them, in some organizations where the team that controlled the coaching staff, or in some cases maybe owned the affiliate, they were the team that got more of a benefit out of that affiliation. So I don't think that's a particular issue this year. I think everybody's pitching in, especially at the American Hockey League level, to do what they need to do. I believe the Calder Cup sort of been put on ice, so to speak, this year. I mean, not that it's not important, but it's not the primary reason why we have AHL hockey this year. Not that it truly is for development, and it truly is so that these teams can have some players out there ready and continue to develop them for the future.
Okay, on Monday's edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, a baseball show that we do, I mentioned that the Panthers can develop a winning culture. Sellouts I don't believe will be a problem here, especially in a centrally located stadium. The BB&T Center, to me, Mike, is one of the best facilities that I've ever been in, and certainly one of my favorites. And I've been to quite a few arenas over the country, maybe not some of the most recent ones, but this one here is I always joke around with it as being my hockey house. But again, it's a beautiful facility. But I believe that this is a hockey town waiting to erupt. I really, really do, because you have a lot of things going for you here. Number one, you have a great transplant area. I think ownership is even committing to redoing the War Memorial Auditorium area to try to make that a first-class practice facility so they can develop youth hockey. And I know they've been playing at the ice den where you were at for a while. So my question to you is this: okay, obviously winning certainly helps out a lot. We know South Florida is a demanding area where if you win, they'll support. But we've seen the sellouts at BB&T Center. Okay, but let's talk about the South Florida area per se. I know they've held an All-Star game here, and they were preparing to hold another one. COVID-19 probably put those plans on hold just a little bit. But can you see this being a hot ticket down the road here in Sunrise with the Florida Panthers if things are handled the right way, having a consistently winning culture and just changing the image of the franchise? Because the Miami Heat have won 3 titles. The Dolphins are good for 2. The Marlins have won 2. They haven't had a lot of winning seasons, but when they've been in there, they made them count. But there's no reason to think that the Florida Panthers should be able to dominate this market at all if things are handled the right way.
I mean, look, I mean, you're saying the right word, culture, but the culture has to happen inside the locker room. The fans will be attracted to the team. Certainly, winning is a big part of that. I mean, you mentioned the Miami Heat. I mean, I was there through the entire LeBron James run. When I got there, the Heat drew about 3,500 a game, and I was there when LeBron left. And that following season, the Heat drew about 3,500 a game. Everybody loves a winner. We know that. That's not just unique to South Florida. That's in every market. But they fall in love with the fans. Fall in love with the team, not only for its competitiveness, but the culture that they create, and that's got to be created in the locker room. And I think that this is a real unique year, obviously, but it's also a unique opportunity to build a culture. And the reason why I say that is because of the way the team travels this year. I was with Nashville, and one year, and my boss, David Poyle, the general manager there, we were having a discussion early in the year, and he's just like, what's wrong with our team, the culture, the chemistry? And I told him, the players don't know each other. And he said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, watch the next time we go on the road. He said, they pull up on the tarmac in their cars, they get on the plane with their headphones on, they turn on their iPad, the plane lands in another city, and they turn their phones on, and they go to the hotel, and they all have their own hotel room now. They don't have roommates anymore, and they go out to dinner with their agent or somebody that they know in that town, and they don't do things with one another till they're at the rink on the ice the next day. And then the game's over, and they get on a bus, and they charter, and they fly to the next town and get in there at 3:00 in the morning. This year, with the way the schedule's set up, where you're playing 2 or 3 games in the same city against the same team, it's a little bit more of that baseball type schedule. So players have more of an opportunity to go out together on the road, to go to dinner together, to walk around the city together, go shopping, whatever they want to do, but they're doing things outside the rink together as a group. And that's really where the culture, is built. I mean, back in the day, I grew up in Boston, and I can remember teams coming into the Boston Garden, and as soon as the game was over, there weren't charter planes in those days. Everybody flew commercial, so they weren't flying out to the next morning. But after the game, they couldn't talk to the media and shower fast enough because they were all heading to the same bar, all 22 of them, before it closed, to hang out together. And that because of the way teams travel, on charter airlines, the way they're in the air and getting into cities at 3:00 in the morning and having their own hotel room. They're not talking to anybody. They're not sharing a room with anybody. I think that's really cut into the culture. So this particular schedule this year and this pandemic, I don't think could have come at a better time for the Panthers as far as building a culture, because you can do all kinds of things off the ice. I've done them myself, but it's up to those guys in that room to build the culture and to build the relationships with one another, and that's what takes you far in any season, and that's what eventually attracts the fans and makes them fall in love with your team. And if
Well,
that happens, I think you're gonna see, the BB&T filled up on most nights, and I've been there. I was there in 2012 when the team came out of nowhere, and it built over the course of the season. And by the time we got to the end of the season, and particularly in the playoffs, you couldn't get in that building. So I think the same thing will happen with this group.
yeah, well, I mean, the potential is there. Any championship team is built on not only character leaders in there, but the ability to like each other, the ability for the coaches to instill that positive personality in there. You don't need a coach who's belittling guys all the time, where you lose the locker room and then they quit on you. In order to win, you have to like each other first. And be able to, you take the good with the bad. You don't throw anybody under the bus, and then all of a sudden that energy and that culture becomes contagious. And I think that's probably what, if I understand correctly, Mike, that you're referring to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, everybody uses the buzzword culture, and everybody wants to create a culture. You can't create a culture. A culture's got to happen, and it's got to happen with those guys in the locker room.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the Panthers' skill players. Are there any particular skill players, Mike, that stand out for you this season?
Um, well, the skilled players that stand out for me are the skilled players that, frankly, have stood out for me for a number of years, and guys that I was a part of drafting. I mean, Alex Barkov. I mean, he's as skilled as any player in the league. I mean, for me, he's the Jean Rattel of the era. I mean, he's just slick and smooth. I mean, he's got as good as all around skill as any other player in the league. I mean, the way he plays the game. Um, Certainly, Jonathan Huberdeau. I mean, how can you argue with that? And then even veteran guys who maybe you think of in a certain way, but Keith Yandel. How do you play that style
Right.
of game for that long and be that durable without being highly skilled? I mean, he's this highly skilled, you know, defenseman. I mean, he may not be, the rough and tumble guy back there, but that's not what he does. He plays a skill game. I mean, Brian Leach never scared anybody for the Rangers, but he's a Hall of Famer. So, those are three guys just off the top of my head. And then, of course, a lot of times we overlook how skillful goaltending is these days too. And you have to certainly have a skillful goaltender in Bob.
Yeah, well, it's funny how you talk about Keith Yandel. Being an old school guy like I am, I love Ironman streaks. I really do. And Keith Yandel, what I have seen when he ended up hitting, his milestones, I think they went out there and honored him, and had a night for him after, I think, the Carolina game where you get these new Ironman milestones. You think of Cal Ripken, you think of Lou Gehrig, you think of a lot of other guys. But let's talk about Keith Yandel, a very high character guy. What do you know about Keith Yandel, and how important is he going to be down the stretch with this team? Because he obviously can provide leadership, but not only does he provide leadership, but he leads by example because he goes to work every single day.
Yeah, no, I know a lot about Keith Yandel because he's a Boston guy. I knew him.
Right.
I actually know his family very well. His father and I know his uncle, who was my age, and so I know the family. It's a good Charlestown family. They've been involved in hockey forever, and there's certainly I would say even a part of a hockey royalty in Boston, which is really something, particularly when you're from Charlestown. So, um, you know, I don't know what more I can say about the kid. I mean, when you play, like you said, when you come to work every day, um, and you're able to do that and keep yourself, healthy. I don't care who you are. You cannot. You've got to be dedicated to the game 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because you just cannot accomplish what he's accomplished. Um, Particularly talking about his Ironman streak, if you don't have your act together off the ice. So I think that's where it begins. And he's he's a skillful player. I mean, I don't want to compare him to Brian Leach, but he's going to play that style of game. He's not. You don't sign Keith Yandle to push guys around in your own end. Uh, you sign Keith Yandle to get the puck out of your own end quickly. To make that right play on the point of the power play, whether it's to get the puck on the net or whether it's to make the quick pass to set somebody else up. I mean, he's a cerebral player and he's highly skilled.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with his overall demeanor and the way his teammates love him. But then again, I see a lot of that type of thing with this team, that just the way they rally around each other, no matter how difficult the circumstances are. So, with that said, okay, let's talk about the Joel Quenneville factor. The guy won 3 Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks. He's been around forever, won a lot of hockey games, and he seems to be a very stabilizing influence. So why don't you just give everybody out there your perception of Joel Quenneville?
Never worked with Joel, but certainly been in organizations where we faced him a lot, particularly my time in Nashville, where we were in the same division and meet up with Chicago once in a while in the playoffs. So, I respect everything he's done as a coach, particularly in Chicago. But I think not to not to undercut what he's done, but I think the most important thing that's happened with Joel Quenneville is he's provided some stability in that position and stability for that locker room. I mean, Joel Quenneville, I believe, was the 10th coach the Panthers had in 10 years with the previous GM, and that's just not a way to create a winning hockey environment. You just can't have that many coaches, and I could probably rattle them all off for you right here in about a minute. But the fact that he brings that stability, I think every day that the players look at him and they don't think like, well, he's going to be gone at the end of the year, or he's going to be gone next year. Um, having that feeling is important to these players, right? That, along with the fact that he commands respect because he's been successful and he's been a winner and he's won Stanley Cups. So I think that's the biggest thing that Joe Quenneville brings to the room. The X's and O's are important. The work behind the scenes are important, but at this level, honestly, I mean, these guys on the ice have to be motivated enough to do the things we talked about with Keith Yandle, to take care of themselves, to be dedicated to their teammates, to dedicated to the game, to do the preparation work, whether it's on the ice or off the ice or in the film room, getting ready for game after game. I mean, those are things that the coaches are a part of, but really the responsibility lies in the players. I think, again, the biggest thing that Joel Quenneville brings is stability and respect.
Well, I mean, the Panthers have had their fair share of bit well-known coaches. Roger Nielsen, everybody views him as one of one of the better hockey minds out there. Gerard Gallant had a short tenure, but it was successful here. We know about Mike Keenan being a hard-nosed type of coach. He kind of reminds me a lot of John Tortorella a little bit. And then, of course, you have Joel Quenneville, Mr. Stable. I've won 3 cups. I've been around forever. And, of course, a lot of people that are probably wondering about the broadcast, he's from I believe he's from Windsor, Ontario, right? I think he's in the Windsor Spitfire area as well. So, but Joel Quenneville, to me, so it's not like the Panthers haven't had good coaches, but there seems to be a certain feel about Quenneville that you have compared to some of the other ones. Do you notice that as well?
Well, again, I mean, I'm not saying the Panthers haven't had good coaches. They've just had a lot of them.
Okay.
And when you're a Jonathan Huberdeau, or when you're an Alex Barkov, and you come into the organization as a young guy, and the first 6 or 7 years you're in the league, you got a different coach every year. That's a problem.
Right.
That's a problem. for whatever reason. And now you've got a guy who's your coach who you respect what he's done. Not that they haven't respected maybe some of the other coaches that have been in that locker room, but you understand that he's going to be there. He's going to be there next year and hopefully the year after that, and that he's there to stay. And I think that and part of that again goes to what I mentioned a little while back in this conversation, the fact that you've got a management team there now that understands that you don't just tear things apart. That you've got to have some stability, and you've got to they have to prove themselves to this group of players too, right? I mean, the management team's new here. The players, a lot of them aren't. And they've seen different groups of coaches, especially coaches, scouts, management people come and go. So you come in as a new general manager, Billy Zito, and a new management team, and you got to prove to yourself, to these guys, especially guys like Barkov and Huberto, that you're the real deal. And I think they've done a really good job of that. And one of the things they've done is create stability by letting everybody know that Joel Quenneville's our coach. He's going to be our coach.
What is your perception of Bill Zito?
I like Bill. I mean, I've known him for years. Conducted business with Bill. I think he was a great hire, and I think he can be a no nonsense guy when he wants to. I think he's a smart guy, and I think that's one of the things that gets overlooked these days when it comes to selecting management people, especially general managers, is that you don't necessarily need somebody who played in the National Hockey League. You need an intelligent guy, a guy that's willing to go to work every day and punch the clock and do the things that are necessary. And it's a much more evolved game now. You've got a collective bargaining agreement with lots of rules and regulations and thousands of pages, and it takes intelligent, well-educated people to be able to sift through that information and build a good hockey organization. And I think Bill's the type of guy that can do it.
All right. Today, the Florida Panthers signed a young goaltender by the name of Spencer Knight to a 3-year entry-level contract. He's out of Boston College. He's a Panthers 2019 first-round pick. He helped lead the U.S. to a gold medal at the 2021 World Juniors, and obviously he was a top. I believe he was a top 10 finalist for the NCAA's Hobie Baker Award. We've talked about the goaltender theme a lot, beginning with Roberto Luongo, obviously as good as it gets. Sergey Bobroski will be here for a while. Obviously, when you sign an entry-level contract, okay, then you have a little room to develop. But I think the thing that I was intrigued about with Spencer on the media availability today is management convinced him it was a good place to be, and I think he's really looking forward to working with Sergey Bobrovsky. So what do you know, Mike, about Spencer Knight? You said you know a lot about this kid, and I know that you're around the game a lot. What do the Florida Panthers have to look for with Spencer Knight?
Well, for a young kid, he's already played in big time games, right?
Right.
Whether it's a junior gold medal game. He's been in big time games at Boston College for 2 years. I mean, this kid's a high level talent. Um, the Panthers did a great job selecting him in the draft. I mean, it was a great selection. Now comes the tough part with any goaltender or any talented goaltender for any organization, and that is giving the player time to develop properly. And goaltenders take a little longer to develop. And I
Okay.
think it's a good situation for the kid to get into because, as far as I know, Bobrovsky's not going anywhere soon.
Right.
Nor And so I don't think you want Spencer Knight, opening the door at the end of the bench as the backup goalie in Florida. I think, and I would believe that the Panthers management team made it known to Spencer that they want to get him in the organization so they can help him develop, but that his job is going to be to get lots of shots in the American Hockey League, probably for a few years. Again, the goaltenders take longer to develop. They also last the longest in the league. The great goalies in this league are playing well into their 30s. Pecorini's 36 this year.
Right.
When I was in Nashville, we actually put Pecorini in the American Hockey League for a third year. We're crazy, but you've got to let young goalies develop. You got to let them play a lot. It's a lot better to play 60 games in the American Hockey League than 15 in the National Hockey League. And in games in the National Hockey League as a goaltender before you're ready can really kill a confidence. We've seen so many guys just get the net too early and they disappear. And so I think that that's the plan, which I certainly believe the Panthers management's smart enough to do that, and they've got enough smart goalie people there, including Roberto Luongo, that
Right.
they'll move along slow. And you'll probably see a situation I hope you'll see a situation very similar to what Tampa did with Vasilevsky, where they had Bishop, a Bishop who was actually their guy and got them to a Stanley Cup final. They didn't win it. And then, when Vasilevsky was in their minds finally ready to take over, they moved Bishop near the end of his contract and moved Vasilevsky into the spot. I think you'll see a similar situation, but it'll be a few years, and it should be. You got a 20-year-old kid, he's going to be a lot different person when he's a 23, 24-year-old man.
Would you compare the mindset, Mike, of a goaltender to a quarterback in the NFL, where, let's just use this as an example. A lot of people like to do it. I'm going to do it as well. Where you have Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. If you're a Green Bay Packer fan, okay. Aaron sat for a while until it was time for him to take over, because Brett kept waffling to a point where Mike McCarthy wouldn't let him waffle anymore and moved on with Aaron Rodgers. But, Aaron had a lot of time to develop until he was ready to make that leap as starter. But do you feel that the mindsets are comparable to the two positions, a goaltender as well as a quarterback?
I don't know if it's the mindset of the player. I think it's more the mindset of the organization.
Okay.
And but I do think that that's a really interesting analogy, because the organizations in the NFL that are willing to draft a quarterback and bring him along and let him learn under somebody else, and let him progress at his own pace, are the ones that over long term end up with a successful winning quarterbacks. Just like the goaltenders in the NHL. The first round picks that end up under center in the NFL in the first year, end up with careers like the 19-year-old goalies that end up in the net in the NHL, and you don't hear about them after 3 or 4 years. I mean, Johnny Manziel, for instance, or
Right.
it's just very hard to take a young person like that and put them into those important pressure type situations in a man's game. There's nowhere to hide in goal in the NHL. Jacques Plante once said, how do you like a job where every time you make a mistake, they put a red light on over your head and everybody boos you?
Right.
Like, it's a tough pressure position, and you can really kill a kid's confidence, and you can really ruin a good goaltender if you try to push him in there too soon, just like he can with a young quarterback.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at positions in every sport, whether it's a pitcher, you can ruin them quick if you don't handle them the right way. A quarterback obviously is a focal point at the end of football, as well as a goaltender. The spotlight's on these guys all the time. Once the puck comes in their direction, they're all looking at it. They're not looking for empty net goals, that's for sure. So, either you're the hero or the GOAT on every shot, it almost seems like to me. But when we look at the Florida Panthers, per se, as we approach a stretch run for the 2021 season, Mike, how far can this team really go? I mean, I know they've been hit with some recent injuries, but they've done a magnificent job navigating through the COVID-19 situation, where a lot of other teams struggle with that early on. I mean, again, we all know hockey is a very physical sport. Of course, back in the day when we were growing up, there was a lot more fighting involved, but you still have the physicality in hockey. where you can sustain that injury that keeps you out for a while. But how far can the Florida Panthers go as we approach a stretch run, Mike?
Well, I mean, first of all, with the COVID situation, I mean, so far so good, right? But
Right.
you know, I would never get too confident or cocky with managing COVID. I mean, anything can
Okay.
happen at the worst time. So that is just going to happen. And what's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, I'm sure they're doing everything, very well. Certainly, I've done at this point to avoid it. But anything could happen. But that aside, I mean, how far they could go, they could go all the way. I mean, they really could. But the challenge initially is going to be to get out of their division. And as we said before, they've done the job they've needed to do, taking care of the lesser teams in their division, winning the lion's share of those games, and they've been very competitive and successful against both Tampa and Carolina. So a lot will happen as it always does when it comes down to seeding. I mean, if the Panthers could grab that top seed in the division, that could be really important because now all of a sudden you've got Tampa and Carolina. They're going to match up in the first round, and somebody's going to go right. So instead of having to go through two of those teams, possibly you're only going to have to go through one of them. And you got to look at who's coming up and who's playing well at the end of the year. I mean, right now Nashville's hotter than a pistol.
Right.
The Panthers have done very well against Nashville this year, so maybe that's a perfect matchup for them, right? So, but we've seen teams before. We've seen the LA Kings get hot at the end of the year, finish in the 8th spot, and win the Stanley Cup. We've seen the Edmonton Oilers get hot at the end of the year, squeeze into the 8th spot in a playoff series, and end up going to 7 games in the finals before losing the Stanley Cup. So, I mean, there's so much hockey left to play, but they certainly have as good a chance as anybody else. And when I say anybody else, I really mean Tampa and Carolina winning that division. And then because there's been no, play between division teams, between teams in the other divisions and the Panthers, who knows, right? I mean, who knows? Who knows who's going to come out of those divisions, and who knows how they match up because we haven't seen it.
Well, we know full well that the trade deadline, I believe, is April the 12th. So there are moves that can be made there. I'm sure Bill Zito is very cognizant of that. And more importantly, the one thing about hockey, I always love the hockey playoffs more than any of them, that a hot goaltender can carry you the distance for sure. So with that said, do you think that Sergey Bobroski is that type of goaltender that could carry you the distance, compared to some of the other ones that have taken over at key times? I'm sure that we could go through that list.
I think he could, sure, but he hasn't done it yet.
Okay.
And he's got to do it, and he's capable of doing it. But right now, you've got a guy in your division that's already done it. You've got a guy named Vasilevsky that's already done it, and so right now, I mean, you've got to give Tampa a little bit of an edge because of that. But again, I mean that's I think not only like we talked about before, one of the great things that could happen for the sport and for the sport in all Florida, especially South Florida, but that could really be, and when I say that, I mean a playoff matchup with the Tampa Bay Lightning. That could be the thing that finally, after 25 plus years, brings the Panthers to the next level and brings their fans to the next level.
Yeah, I've only seen these two teams play once this year, and their games that I'll be seeing obviously as the year goes on. I can only imagine how ugly and nasty this is going to get as we go down the stretch between the Lightning and the Panthers. I really can. But I think you're right for the state of Florida. I think it would be unbelievable. I think also when you look at
It would be for the state of goaltending too. I mean, there's your chance, man. I mean, Bobrovsky did it a couple of years ago with Columbus. It would be a heck of a lot different if you could do it for the Panthers against the Lightning.
I think you brought up an interesting point that I really never thought about until you mentioned it. The Florida Panthers probably travel more, especially during a regular year, being in Southern Florida, than a lot of the teams out there. I can't imagine the only team that would travel any further would be the Vancouver Canucks, and of course the Seattle Kraken will join the league next year. But the Panthers do have a lot of frequent flyer miles for sure, and I think a lot of people underestimate the fact that this team, obviously, does travel, especially during normal circumstances. This year, I don't think their travel schedule is as demanding because everybody's broken down into geographical areas. So, do you have any closing thoughts about the Panthers in general? I know, again, you've seen a lot of things over the years. I know you work with Dell Talon. Is that correct? For a period of time?
I was with Dale Talon for 4 years, but when I was in Nashville, I was actually starting to devise divisional alignments for the NHL.
Okay.
And I finished that during my first year with the Panthers, and then after my second year was when the league actually changed the divisional alignment. The problem is my initial alignment for the Panthers division had Nashville, Dallas, and St. Louis in it, but our president of the team at that time was more concerned with selling tickets against some certain teams. So he went into the board of governors meeting and actually changed it. And so we ended up with Montreal, Toronto, Buffalo, and Boston in our division with Tampa and Florida. And so it didn't really help us at all. Now you're seeing a division which was a lot closer than the one I had devised back in the day. Um, and, you know, I think that that's helped the Panthers tremendously this year, not having to do that crazy travel. And hopefully they'll look at this and realize that and stop worrying about having Montreal come into the BB&T Center 4 times so they can sell out 4 games and start giving the team a better chance to be more competitive and win, and then they'll sell out 41 games.
Do you have any friends or people that you know are with the Panthers as we speak right now?
Uh, yeah, I mean, plenty of them. I mean, I would consider a lot of the folks on their management team friends, including Bill Zito and uh, Paul Fenton, who's I believe some sort of an advisor with the organization. His son PJ, who I actually had play for me in Rochester
Right.
way back when. Um, you know, Blake Jeffrey on, who's a kid I had in with the U.S. National Development Program when I was a commissioner in the North American Hockey League, and then when I was with the Panthers, we drafted him. So, yeah, plenty of folks, including I would consider Roberto Luongo a friend, and Robbie Tallis, goalie coach. I mean, the list goes on. So yeah, there's plenty of people in the organization, and I'm really excited that the success that the organization is having is this year is coming our way. I did spend a brief time with the ownership group, especially Vinny Viola, Doug Sifu, and terrific people. So I'm glad to see all this is finally coming their way.
Yeah, well, I mean, they deserve it. Like I said earlier in the broadcast, Mike, beautiful arena, great location, and the thing about this organization is they can draw from Dade County, Palm Beach County, and Broward County. And again, there are a lot of transplants in the area, but I don't think they should have to rely on transplants if they're taking care of their business. So I think this is a hockey town waiting to erupt. It's just a matter of being able to put all the pieces together, and one can only hope that that continues. By the way, folks, this is the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, Rough Motor City Badmouth. Pleased to be joined by Mike Santos. Mike Santos used to be the assistant general manager on a couple of occasions for the Florida Panthers. We're glad that he's with us on the broadcast tonight. For all you folks that want to follow the Sports Exchange, you can view this broadcast on our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Subscribe to that. This broadcast can also be seen on our website, southfloridatribune.com. And we push it all around social media on Twitter at Tribune South. So, there's a lot of different ways to access the broadcast. I've been working with Mike a long time. He's certainly a guy that I really trust for my hockey information. He's been around a long, long time. And, I am so delighted to have you on the show tonight talking about a team that you worked with for a long time and that you know a lot about, and I think that it would be good for the area for this team to do well. And, we can only see what happens as time goes on. Any closing thoughts about this organization in general and what we can expect going forward?
Look, I still make my home in South Florida, and so I still consider it my team. I always will, and I think the fans are finally going to get what they deserve, which is a winning hockey team, and I hope that they return the favor by showing up at the BB&T Center and giving this team the support it deserves. If that happens, we're going to have a lot of good years in the future to come, and maybe we'll even see that we'll see that silver chalice going down the intercoastal one day.
Well, I've always been a firm believer that this is a hockey town waiting to erupt. We'll find out with the core of players that they have, because you said it throughout the broadcast, Mike. They have a lot of players that play for each other, and while they may have, and again, when you have guys pulling together, you have to have superstars that complement the role players. And as long as you have that with good coaching, then you certainly have a recipe for success for sure. And I'll tell you, starting with Roberto Luongo, Sergey Bobroski, and now potentially Spencer Knight, one can only hope that that goaltending position will be one to stabilize for a while. But there's a lot of moving parts of this organization, and I know we have a lot to. We'll find out as things go on. So, but meanwhile, Mike, I can't thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. Once again, my name is Scott Morganroth, and I'm pleased to be joined by Mike Santos. So, any closing thoughts, Mike?
Well, that's all I have. It's past my bedtime. I can't stay up for the West Coast games anymore, Scott. Getting too old. So.
Oh, you know what? I can appreciate that. But meanwhile, I appreciate you staying here on the Sports Exchange with us and talking Florida Panthers hockey, Mike. So God bless and thanks again for being with us, Mike.
Scott, take care.
Thank you.